I'm your host, Lois Hermann, and I'm here to inspire you with positive messages and celebrate everyday people who are making a difference in our world. When we focus our thoughts and energies on what we love to do, we create powerful shifts that cause us to be more positive and peaceful. As we lift our energy, we empower everyone around us. If we each do what we can to make small shifts in awareness from kindness to healthy habits and simple happiness, we create ripples of hope. Join us as catalysts for positive change for our families, our communities, and our world at large. I hope you're inspired by today's show. And today, I just want to welcome you to a wonderful springtime week. And what are you doing this spring? Are you clearing the clutter? Well, I am. What are you doing to prepare for the next phase of your journey, your life? Well, with the manuscript for book two, safely tucked in the publisher's capable hands, I am sorting through attic boxes, files, books, and so much stuff, clearing the clutter and making way for the next phase of life. It's amazing what we hold on to in our world, in our body, in our mind, and in our closets. What we hold on to in our mind creates stress in our physical body. What can you do to let go of, and what can you find out about yourself, about who you might be? That clutter that's growing dust bunnies in our minds prevents us from growing into the light of positive energy and new awareness. As we clear a path, wonders await. When we weed out what is unnecessary in our minds, we till the soil for new seeds of thought, new potential for growth, new opportunities we couldn't even see before. They were there. We couldn't see them for the weeds, for that hamster wheel that goes on. My wonderful webmaster once said, Lois, you're like the antivirus for the mind. I said, I love that. And it describes exactly what I do with hypnosis. I help people to shift into the positive. So he was working on helping to get some clarity. He was developing some new creative concepts and described himself as being stuck. He was comfortable doing analytical projects, yet he was constantly distracted like shiny object when he wanted to get creative. As we tapped into his wise mind on a personal journey, he discovered some old self-limiting beliefs that needed to be removed, to be resolved, to be understood before he could embrace and empower himself with these new creative pursuits. Once he removed the old mind junk that was keeping him stuck, his wise mind showed him to be creative, he needed to listen to a different type of music. I could have never thought of that. His mind gave him that. He discovered that listening to classical music was great to help him focus on analytical work. Yet, when he wanted to be creative, he needed to change the music to be more engaging, loud, energetic, hard rock, something that really got his juices flowing. This was the solution he was looking for to keep himself focused, productive, excited, and successful. It really worked for him. So everybody has their own unique skills, gifts, and talents, as I call them. And when people do the hypnosis work, when they journey within, they can find those solutions for themselves. And that's what I do as a catalyst for positive change individually. I help people to shift out of those old stuck patterns and help them to shift into more productive patterns. So what do you need to do to get yourself unstuck? You can schedule a private discovery journey with me at loishermann.com. You could also join a group of like-minded folks to inspire yourself for change. Our Inspiring Hope community is designed to help people on a spiritual quest to share messages given in Chronicles of Hope. You can register at chroniclesofhope.net. We meet a couple times a month, and it's a wonderful, engaging group. And you can just listen in if you want, but it's a place where you can come to share, to be inspired. And that's one source of insight. There are many paths that lead to enlightenment, to empowerment. Many people offer their own amazing gifts as way showers to help others on their quest. Many of us have been through some pretty intense negative situations in our past, and we've pushed through them. And so, as we do that, we've learned ways that have helped us. And as we learn those ways that help us, we're inspired to help others, to get others to do the same. We share what we have learned with others on the journey. And my next guest is one of those way showers, one of these people who has developed ways to help people. And in a minute, I'm going to have her on. But let me tell you what I discovered when I in sorting through the boxes yesterday. I discovered a quote that I love from this is actually a Sanskrit proverb. Yesterday is but a dream. Tomorrow is only a vision, but today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. And you are listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Hermann. And we're here every Sunday morning with a different special guest. And today, my special guest is Kathryn Costa, an instigator of soulful and creative living. Please help me welcome Kathryn. Good morning.
Good morning, sunshine. How are you this morning, Lois?
I am, to be honest, I am having a hard time getting going because I have been immersed in books and files and boxes and dust, and it's been a great talk about soulful journey. I found a picture of myself in a bikini when I was like in my teens, and I'm thinking back then I thought I was fat. Yeah, well, no.
Oh, isn't it weird how we have that sort of like perception?
Yeah.
I too, when I was younger, used to think I was fat, and my mother would be like, "Stop it," and I didn't believe her.
Right.
And now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to be that thin. I would like, maybe 20 pounds heavier, 30 pounds heavier than that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I found
Funny
some
how
really
that is.
great old pictures and old sayings and things like that. It was just, it's diving into history. I need to do it with my mask on though, because of all the dust, and it's all good. So tell
It's good
us.
to clear the dust though, and revisit those stories and remember that essence of who we are.
Exactly. And that's part of it. I was telling Art a few minutes ago that what's interesting is as I'm clearing some of these boxes and files and stuff, I'm wondering, okay, what would my children want to do with this? Do I just need to get rid of it? This is a phase of my life, which was important to me, but is it important to anyone else? So it's interesting.
That's really good thing to be thinking about. It is so true. What's important to us, and what legacy are we leaving behind, and how and what form do we do that? And that opens up a great conversation over dinner, over a good meal with your kids and your loved ones, and say, "Hey, let's talk about this."
Yeah,
because you might discover that there's something that they really do, cherish and hold in their heart. In fact, right now I am sitting in my very favorite chair. It's interesting that this is coming up as a conversation. This is so unplanned, right? But I'm sitting here with a beautiful table that was my grandmother's, a coffee table. And the whole story behind this table was that it was rescued out of a fire, and it was at a estate sale. And this table, if you can picture this, it's an oval shape, and it's very ornate with wood. And the top of it has this inlaid wood pattern, and the top is a tray that lifts up with a glass on the top. And my father had restored it. He was an engineer, and any hobby or anything he did was extremely meticulous.
Yeah.
He had this real care for putting love into everything he did, and so he restored it. And so I happen to be enjoying it. It's part of my morning ritual. And I just today pulled out a picture of her to join me today, along with one of my spiritual guides, which is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So here I've got some ancestors with me.
Of course. Yes, I always invite the ancestors and our guides to help with this journey as we share and invite others on the journey with us. So Kathryn, tell us about yourself.
Oh gosh, there's so much that I could talk about, but I think if I were to sum it up, this is something I'm really practicing on. How can I be more succinct in my storytelling? I started this soulful and creative practice really in sharing it with others 12 years ago. And back then I started it with blogging. And for our listeners who don't know what blogging is, it's a website where you can easily post words and pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, I call it old school blogging because blogging has changed a lot over the years. But back then, people would share their interests. It's almost like a diary online, a journal online.
I see.
And a lot of people would make fun of us bloggers because they'd be like, "Oh, you're putting all your heart out on there." But in fact, for me, it was an awakening. It gave me an opportunity to discover my own voice, which was lost in the process of growing up and becoming a wife and a mother and spending so much time taking care of other people that I lost my sense of identity along the way. And I think it's really interesting that I'm now seeing a little thread here with our opening comments about going back and looking at the artifacts from our life and rediscovering some of the aspects of the self that we've lost along the way. I mean, it's not really that they've been lost, but they've been forgotten. So my journey in sharing my soulful and creative way of life started 12 years ago with a blog. And since then, I've had a lot of adventures and a lot of ways of connecting with people. I have continued with online as a community developer, having various online communities. Back then, I started blogging within 4 months. I was leading a weekly session called Soul Journaling, where there would be a very thoughtful prompt, as well as some art techniques to be able to express oneself and reflect on those themes in one's journal in a creative way. And I had people from all over the world within 4 months following me online, and that has grown over the years. So to the point where I've served people in 175 different countries.
That's
I didn't even
amazing.
know there were that many countries.
Well, I know that you're very creative and very colorful. Following you over the years, you post such interesting. It's like you're a photographic. I don't know. You just do such a beautiful, creative job with all of your artwork and your photography. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I'm very visual, and I adore beauty, and in capturing those sacred moments, and seeing the ordinary in an extraordinary way, and I capture it through photography, but also through the expressive arts, and that's creating with intention, and not so much about the mastery of the skill, although some people look at my work and think it's masterful, and I appreciate that. I'm very humbled by that. But also in word. So how do we express ourselves in a way and concepts like that? So, yeah.
So, yeah, I know that you got really into mandalas there for a while. Tell us a story about that.
Well, yeah. So, I'll tell you the backstory and how I first learned about them, and then how it showed up in a very strong and focused way about 5 years ago. But my history with mandalas started back when I was teaching a high school graphic design program at Kearsarge Regional High School. And I want to say that was about 18 years ago. And in that first year, the teacher who was also a first-year teacher there from the art department, we became friends naturally because we both have an affinity for art. And as she got to know me, she said, "Kathryn, I see in you someone who loves, she saw the contemplative in me, the one who's always philosophical and loves the psychology of examining our life." And she said, "I think you'd really be interested in the work of Carl Jung." And she, in her background, she had studied art therapy. So she told me about how in her studies, the teacher gave them an assignment to keep a journal, and every day they were to draw a circle. And within that circle, just fill it with color and form and keep a record of what was going on in their lives. And then you can look back and see what were the colors, the symbols, the arrangements, and how did what showed up there, inform who you are. And those, in fact, become like maps of your subconscious.
So the different colors and shapes mean something different as you're interpreting them? Yeah.
Yes. So it's interesting. We want to go on a little side note about interpreting our art. It's a fascinating subject. There are two ways of looking at it, and I encourage people to first tap in intuitively and connect with their art and what they're seeing and their own personal stories, their own personal color stories, or their own symbols. So, for example, you may, or I'll give the example from me. When I was a child, I didn't like the color pink. I associated the color pink with Barbie, and I thought of that as being shallow, being superficial, being plastic. I wanted to be recognized for my thoughts, not for my appearance. And being a pretty girl, and my mother putting me into beauty pageants and all that, there was all this emphasis on how I looked, and I really resented that. So for me, that pink color represented vanity. And it wasn't until I got older that I changed my opinion of pink. Now I absolutely love the color pink, and I'm exploring being that feminine side of me, the playful side of me, the sensual side of me, the little girl in me is coming out again. And that I can be serious and do good works, but I don't have to do it in a heavy way. I can do it in a playful way. So my color story with pink has changed over the years. So when I see pink showing up in my artwork, there are different shades of it. There's the light pink versus the vibrant hot pink.
The hot pink,
and where does it show up in it? So we can go into a greater depth of that. But then there's the universal colors of it. So if you're looking at like a light pink, there is the rose quartz, and that's associated with the heart chakra.
Of course.
And that's that compassion and understanding that softness and that loveliness. So I always encourage people before they go looking up in a book of symbology or, looking at the meaning of colors and what other people have to say about it. First tap in and say, oh, what does this say about what's my story with it? What is my understanding? Because that's the most important indicator, because your artwork that you're creating is a reflection of you and your understanding, and only you can interpret it. Someone like me, I've been trained to help people go through this process and explore it. But there's a danger in someone interpreting another person's artwork because you can project yourself into it. Well,
I know in your story with your high school group, that was a pretty fascinating story, how they ended up coming together and really bonding.
Yes, that's from that where I got started. Thank you for bringing me back, because I totally went off on a tangent there. So Kelly Cody was her name, the art teacher who introduced me to mandalas. And she said to me, Kathryn, not only can you do this as a personal journey, but you can also facilitate groups. And she said, she gave me some tips. And so I'm like, I'm going to try it. Being curious as I am, I'm like, I want to see what this is like. And so to facilitate this, I had 18 students in my graphic design program, and they all came from different backgrounds. And so this is a really interesting experiment, because I gave them a huge piece of paper with a big circle on it. And I really didn't know much about mandalas at the time. And I said to them, as a group, you guys get to decide what you're going to put in this circle. And I then stepped back, and I had to be quiet, because as a facilitator, you can't interact because you don't want to guide them into a process. You want them to figure out and work together and have that process unfold.
Exactly.
So to give you a little background of the type of students that I had, it was the first year that the high school was offering this, what they called a cooperative program. And it was in graphic design. And guidance really didn't know who to put in that class. They didn't really understand it. So there were kids who were artistic, because we used computers and learned how to do graphic design on the computer. They had one kid, he was really into computers and thought, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to learn how to do graphics. Another kid, he was into math, and he was a math geek, but he was interested in everything about life. So he came in. There were kids from the Sugar Shacks. The kids, there was an athlete, amazing artists, and so forth. So they all came from different cliques, different backgrounds. And so as we sat around this, and I gave them the assignment, and I said, it doesn't have to be symmetrical at all. It can be anything in there. Well, instantly, the boy who loved math always had a compass and a protractor with him. And he looked around, he immediately counted how many people there were, and he got right to work without anybody. He didn't check in with anybody. He just dove right in, and he just divided up an equal number of sections for everybody. And he drew a couple of small circles right in the center. And so then they all took a seat around this circle and then decided, well, what are we going to do with this? And one of them said, hey, doesn't it look like an eye in the center with that center circle? And then there was a band, another circle just outside of that. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, hey, how about, their first decision was, how about if in that band, just outside of that center circle, we color with our own eye color? And I just gasped. I quietly gasped. I'm like, oh my goodness, they're already having a shared vision.
Yeah.
Like, I was so giddy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating.
Yeah, they were working cooperative. They were working together on a single project, which is fascinating.
But then they were coming up with a shared vision, and it looks like an eye. I mean, the meaning and the multi-meanings, I mean, it was just so incredibly fun. Then they decided, as they're sitting in front of their wedge, they're sitting there, and this is such a typical high school perspective. They decided that they could do anything that they wanted in that wedge, but they were going to somehow connect what they had created in theirs with the person next to them. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I had told them they had to work with the person next to them, they would have resisted that.
Right.
They totally would have, because you cannot tell teenagers what to do.
No,
you can't.
You want to invite them to
they will resist it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I couldn't even invite them to work with their partner. They decided that they were going to work with their partner. They decided that they wanted to make a connection with their neighbor. And I was like, oh, this is good. So the memory that comes to mind was this boy who was so into computers, real computer nerd, cute kid. And he did not have strong drawing skills. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting to see what he does and if that would hold him back or if he would step into it. And he drew a mouse, a very simple computer mouse with and you could tell instantly what it was, and a cord that came from it and over to the edge. And the girl sitting to his right was such a masterful artist. At the time, she was in high school, she was getting paid to paint murals, and they were incredible. And so she took that and it flourished into something quite amazing.
Wow.
So that's an example of how, they sat around and they all had a place at the circle. It was then interesting to hear in the time that they all sat around the circle and worked together, the conversations. And it reminded me of, as a parent, you have your kids in the back seat with their friends and they start talking and they forget that there's an adult in the car. And you're really like getting really quiet and just like listening. You're getting information here, like what's in their minds, what's important to them. And that was the case because they were so wrapped up in this experience and the conversations. It was fun. So to let you know what they were talking about at first, they're like, oh, who do you have as a teacher? And what classes do you have? And this and that. Then they talked about popular culture, the music and, so forth, things on television or movies. And they were finding connecting points.
This is as they're drawing in this big
as
circle.
They're drawing, yeah, exactly. So they're working on their wedge and adding their designs to it and their own creative expression to it. And then I think of it as like a quilting bee, all these women getting together quilting. Well, that's what this is like, but what's interesting was the direction in which this conversation went. It was from the familiar, the safe, the common ground of, shared experiences to going deeper on those shared experiences where they started opening up into the more vulnerable realms and talking about things that helped them realize that they had more in common with one another than at first, even though they came from different cliques, that they really had a lot in common. So this project really is a great example of how you can facilitate a group mandala activity and have it bring people together and bring a sense of unity and help people to understand and break down those differences and show that there's universal connection.
Exactly.
I had these students, just to give you an idea of a time frame that this went, we were on a block system, which is 1.5 hours per block, and I had them for a double block. So I had them for 3 hours with a lunch break in the middle of that for every other day. And they got so into it, and they were really, the conversations were rich as well as what they were putting into the design of it, that we worked on it for 2 weeks. And as that was at the beginning of the school year, and it was probably the smartest thing I stumbled on doing with this group, because it established a rapport and a relationship with this group that
across
carried throughout.
boundaries.
And it was safe for them to come into that classroom, be themselves, know that they had a place there, and that prepared them for learning. And I
That's
think
wonderful.
it accelerated their learning.
So so I'm curious, what happened with the final result when they were finished?
They were all so so proud to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a beautiful symbol, and we had it hanging up in the classroom. And then,
So what did you do with that? This is when it was all done and it was hanging up. And then did you, like, I know when the monks create the mandalas with the sand, the Tibetan monks will make these beautiful mandalas, and then they blow it away. So what did you end up doing with the mandala when it was at the end of the season or the end of the year?
Yeah, well, I'm feeling a very tightening in my chest. Is there kind of a this is the painful for me part of the story. We had an opportunity to put it on display in the library, and it was for an event, and there were other things going on, and so we thought that would be a beautiful contribution to that, which it was. And a week or so after the event, I hadn't picked it up. I hadn't taken it down, and the librarian, without talking to me, took it down and threw it away.
Oh, no.
I know. I was crushed.
Did anybody take a picture? Was this in the era before?
No.
Everybody nowadays would have taken a picture.
This is the era before that. We didn't have cell phones. We did not. I didn't even have a camera. I didn't even own a camera at that point.
Yeah.
I had a camera, a digital SLR, but it broke, and I didn't have any money to have another camera. So I have a very vivid picture of what this looks like.
Yeah, in your mind.
In my mind.
Yeah.
And all I can do is tell the story.
Right.
And
Yeah. So it's interesting.
But I'd like to mention something, though. You brought up the Tibetan tradition of the sand mandala, and I'd love to add a little something about that.
Sure.
That a lot of Westerners don't realize about that story, about what it is that they're doing. So to back up, in the tradition of the Tibetan Buddhists, a group of them travel around demonstrating this practice of the sand painting, the sand mandalas. And they will spend a whole entire week around this very large circle, filling up this circle with the most beautiful, intricate design, one grain of sand at a time. They're leaning over and they're doing this.
And they're praying through the whole thing.
And they are praying. Yes, exactly. So what they're doing is they have their prayerful intentions.
Yes.
Prayerful intentions for peace, unity, loving kindness.
Absolutely.
And as they're doing that, the energy of those intentions are going into this design, one grain of sand at a time. At the end of the week, they have this ceremony where they bring in their big sounds, it's very foreign for us, and it's very ceremonial, and they've got their garb, and they're honoring this. And then they ceremoniously sweep it up, and where they release that is in some nearby water. And so for an American, we look at that and be like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Look at all the time you spent on that. You're destroying it. But in fact, they're not destroying it. They're releasing all of this prayerful intention,
all the energy,
all of the sand, all that energy out into the world.
Yes. And I just want to interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah, please do.
Just for our audience, you are listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Hermann here at WSMN 1590. And today we're speaking with Kathryn Costa, who is formerly known as the Mandala Lady. Nowadays, she is known as an instigator for soulful and creative living with her oasis. And we're talking about the mandalas that the Tibetan monks make. And I know of them, and thank you for sharing about them, about the prayerful intent. And then when they blow it away, they're basically blowing the energy into that area. And people have done some studies that have shown that crime goes down, that so many different things happen when they show up with their intention to create these mandalas. There's a huge shift in the energy of peace in that arena wherever they are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a way that people can create art without having to know how to draw a mandala. I've got a new stencil that just came out a couple of weeks ago, and I call it the Four Gates mandala. And it is inspired by the Tibetan Buddhists, the Buddhist traditions, and the Hindu traditions, the Vedics. But you do not have to have any religious background in order to work with this mandala.
Sure.
And the stencil makes it super easy. All you have to do is just trace the lines, and you've got the basic structure of your mandala. And I intended this mandala as a personal practice for cultivating compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And with each of those four sides, there's what we call a gate. It's an entry point in, and at the center, there's the circle. And before you can enter the circle, you must enter in each of these gates. The gates represent four aspects of the self. So one is the mind and your thoughts. One is your emotions. The other is your body. And the other is your spirit, your passion, your soul calling. And so as you step into each one, you meet yourself where you're at, observing what your thoughts are and your emotions and what's happening in your body and how you're feeling about living your purposeful life. And as you meet yourself where you are and you're filling that with color and form, I invite people to be a sacred observer, observing what's showing up and bringing a loving kindness to it, right? And cultivating that loving kindness. That prepares you for fully stepping into the fifth element, which is the center. And when you step into the center, that prepares you for connecting with spirit, connecting with that universal consciousness, connecting with all living things, and bringing that, filling your own cup up so much with so much love and compassion, then you can serve others and have that overflow. So every time one sits down with the Four Gates mandala, I invite them to cultivate their own loving compassion, their own prayerful intentions for love, peace, and unity.
And I'm sure when people sit down with this, they get their own inspiration, because it's a way of actually engaging mind, body, spirit, and then they're tapping in. It's as if it's a meditation of sorts. A lot of people say, "Well, I have a hard time meditating," but there are many different ways to meditate. From dance to creating things. Being creative is a form of meditation, because your mind is hyper focusing. Yes.
Yeah, it certainly is, because it gives us an opportunity to focus in on what you're creating and get a break from the busyness and the distractions of life, and really in that quiet space, especially if you're stepping into it with the intention of it being a healing and soulful practice, one really can open up their intuition and their inner wisdom, and then connect with spirit at the same time and co-create with spirit is an absolutely amazing. You get into that flow state. It's a beautiful feeling. And from that, you're drawing upon not only your own wisdom, but the wisdom of the collective unconscious and of spirit.
Absolutely. You're tapping into the collective consciousness. And that's one of the things that the collective have said, is that we need to get more creative. We need to do more creative things. Whatever that creativity is to you, each person is unique and different.
And as that instigator, I'm all about that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes. So tell us about how the Oasis came to be. This is your newest passion.
Oh my goodness, Lois, I am so happy that I have this opportunity to share this story. And it's interesting that's happening at this time. Easter morning, I was doing my meditation, my daily meditation, and in that meditation, a very powerful message came through to me that it was time for me to share my spiritual practices with the world. I couldn't keep it to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And backing up, just to give you a little backstory on this, in the last year, I had been feeling like I had been struggling with this creative business that I had committed myself to. I started it 12 years ago, but then 2.5 years ago, I left my day job to dedicate myself full time to nurturing this dream. And I felt like, as hard as I was working, it just was not reaching its potential. And I was tired. I was overworking. I felt stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also was noticing some karmic patterns, some unhealthy patterns that were happening in my life that I saw happening and I didn't know why. Because I'm trying to be very conscious and conscientious. So these things were happening that were really holding me back and I think really stepping into my fullest potential to serve. So one thing led to another, and I started a shamanic apprenticeship program because first and foremost to heal and myself, and then in the process, if I'm called to do that, share that with other people. And when you go to do the shamanic work, it's especially in the intensity that I do, because I play full on. I never do anything halfway.
So
I did
can
I
I
did a deep
interrupt you?
dive.
Can you
Yeah, please
can
do.
you you're just for the viewers or the listeners,
Yeah.
you're listening to the radio show Inspiring Hope with Lois Hermann, and we're listening to Kathryn Costa. And Kathryn, could you please explain to the listeners what does that mean for the shamanic training? Many people don't know what that means.
Yeah. That's a great question. Thank you for bringing me to that, so I can be helpful in explaining. So, what it means to, first of all, what is shamanism? And my understanding of it is that in every single culture, going back from the beginning of man onward, there have been these practices there are wisdom traditions that have connected us with the wisdom of Mother Earth
Mm-hmm.
and all of the elements. And that each of these traditions, irrespective from one another, we've got shamans in Peru, we have them in China, we have them in India, in Russia, and all in here in the U.S., our Native American neighbors. And so in these traditions, they have practices, tools, and wisdom, and what they call medicine,
Mm-hmm.
to help us to heal our body, mind, emotions, and spirit, and connect with a greater spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so in taking this training, I was in learning about these tools and practices, so that way I could recognize what were those things, how am I sick in ways that I didn't even know, that have been holding me back in living a fully vibrant, joyful, and purposeful life. And the process, if you play full on like I do, it was a deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
and going in and looking at some childhood wounding, looking at old patterns and ways of being that I at one time thought would protect me and didn't. It served me at that moment that it
Exactly.
occurred,
Yep.
but it carried through in a way I was not even conscious of, and impact and showing up in ways of self-sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, just a real light thing is I don't have Girl Scout cookies anymore, because if there's a box of Thin Mints, my subconscious, I will eat through a whole row of them. I mean, I'm getting better in understanding that, but I don't know. I haven't had any in the
They
house.
are
I don't know if
good.
I still have that, right?
That's the benefit of being gluten-free. That I
Right.
can't have
So,
those Girl Scout cookies anymore. They actually now have a gluten-free version, which is nice.
cool.
But it's
Oh,
not the same
that's
as the
dangerous.
Samoas and the tagalongs. They're
Yeah.
close, but yes, I hear
Yeah,
you.
so here's there are these subconscious things. That's an example of a subconscious
Mhm.
thing. You consciously know, hey, this isn't good for me. I'm not, and then next thing you know, you find yourself
Yes.
eating the whole thing, and then feeling terrible afterwards. Like after the sugar high is worn off,
Mhm.
a few minutes later, you're like, oh man, I feel sick to my stomach. Why did I do that?
Exactly.
Well, in the shamanic training, we through journeying, ceremony, and a number of different practices, we are able to identify what some of those core woundings are and work on healing them.
That's wonderful.
And it can be, and it involved for me a lot of rest, because it was intense.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was in practicing and leading soul journeys, and also what we call soul retrievals, which is this process of going back in time and being
Yes.
able to identify these things.
Similar
So
things
those
that
were-
I do. I've actually attended different shamanic classes before, and they say you are a shaman. The type of work that I do with the hypnosis,
You most definitely are.
Absolutely, a lot of
You most
regression
definitely
work.
are.
Yes, yeah,
Lois.
same thing. Yeah,
You totally are.
yeah.
And so, okay, so now I got to a point where I had been on social media for 12 years.
Mm.
I had lost my passion for teaching people how to create mandalas
Mm-hmm.
and doing what I had been doing in the way I was doing it. And I was so tired and exhausted, and I just was ready to give up. So coming into January, I'm very intentional. I thought, what is my purpose for doing this? I like to reevaluate when I'm in a course. It was a 9-month course. Once a month, we would meet in Lenox, Mass, to do a weekend training. And so come January, I'm like, all right, let's realign our intentions and be really purposeful with this training. And at that moment, I had decided, and I declared for myself, and I told anybody who would listen or ask, or my fellow, the other participants in the class, I'm like, no, I'm not going to hang up my shingle as a shaman or a shamanic practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even like to think of myself as a shaman, because that's just, I'm not there. But I am a practitioner of these ways.
Of course.
But at the time, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to hang up my shingle and advertise this. That what I want to do is really focus in on learning it, understanding it, practicing it, loving it, making it a lifestyle. And once I integrate it, then, and on my journey, if people happen to discover who I am and that I have these skills and gifts and practices and tools, then great. Then I would be happy. I would love to work with them, but I wasn't going to just step into and say, "Hey, here I am."
Yeah.
That
So
just
you
didn't
ended
feel
up
right to
going
me.
into this whole, you melded all of this training together to create what you're calling your oasis.
Yeah.
And that was the
So what
epiphany
happened?
that you had. Yeah.
So here I come. Now we're fast forwarding. I was totally prepared to quit everything. Quit my popular blog and website, my YouTube channel, my Facebook. The 10,000 people following me, 12,000 on YouTube. Quit everything. And I worked with a resume writer, and I was going to go find a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, you know what? I've got these wonderful skills. I don't seem to be having the energy and the vision for how I can serve doing this myself. That perhaps if I can find a company who I could align with and their mission, then maybe I can serve more people through their platform.
So Spirit had something else in mind for you.
And I was struggling. I was struggling with looking, and every time I would look at job listings or read up about a company, I felt this constriction in my heart, and I was struggling. So during Holy Week, the week before Easter, I surrendered to Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I gave it up. I gave up the struggle and said, you know better than me what is in my heart, what I'm capable of, and how I can best serve, because that's what I want to be. I want to take my gifts and be of service, but I do need to make money. I can't give it away.
Exactly.
I do need to provide for my family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did a full-on surrender and said, I'm going to be ever vigilant. I'm highly intuitive. I listen to you, Spirit. Show up, and I will listen. I promise. I'm open to going in any direction you tell me.
And that's what people need to do. That's what I was talking about early on, is where, everybody is in this time of isolation right now.
Yeah.
We're kind of in our own cocoon, and this is
Yeah.
a great time to take an assessment of, okay, what is working in our lives and what do we need to do to shift. This is a wonderful time to reassess and emerge as we start to poke our head up out of this cocoon, and as we start to come out of this, we're coming out maybe out of the chrysalis a little bit different. Maybe we need to redirect, which it sounds like is what you ended up doing, is getting that awareness, that insight as you've surrendered. Through that surrender comes the realization of where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do. So you created the oasis. We only have 10 minutes left. I'm going to just comment. And I want you to tell us more about what it is that you do to inspire people to stay upbeat. What is the oasis, and what do you recommend to people to stay inspired?
Yeah, so I launched the Oasis a week after Easter, and so it's only been up for a couple of weeks. And once a week, I am hosting live events. They are 2-hour sessions, and I am serving up what I call soul tapas.
Mm-hmm.
They're themes that will give you something that will nourish your soul, and then I lead a soul journey guided meditation that really helps you in that moment to tap into your own inner wisdom and connect with spirit. And so that is priced to be an easy yes for people to be able to serve them on an ongoing basis, week in and week out. And they don't have to, it's a la carte. So if today, this week, it sounds appealing, great, and you're available next week, great. If not, if your budget doesn't allow you to do it every week in a month and you want to come in just once a month, fantastic. I'm keeping it really flexible and fluid. Those who are interested in it but can't attend one of the 3 sessions, I've got 3 different times each Friday, they can enjoy the recording and create a personal retreat for themselves around that recording.
And I know that you include a lot of things to do with astrology and different types of divination.
Yes.
You've got a lot of creative ideas that flow through, very colorful, very creative.
Yeah, so I integrate. So the themes that we explore, one thing that we do is we follow the lunar cycles. And by that, we notice when there's the new moon and the full moon, we really tap into those 2 points. And at the new moon, which is coming up this Friday, it's a new moon in Gemini. So each new moon throughout the year, there's a different flavor to it, a little different style to it. And in each new moon, it gives us the chance to take stock and say, reaffirm those intentions or set new intentions and say, well, what is it that I'd like to invite into my life in this moment? And with Gemini, it shows us the theme of how we may go about that or where we want to focus. And what I love about Gemini, the instigator, soulful and creative life loves about Gemini is that it takes a playful approach. It's an air sign. So it's saying, hey, how can we breathe some fresh air into our life and into our dreams and our wishes and our intentions and have lighten things up and get playful. And that will be the general feeling of that session at the Oasis.
That's wonderful. That's one of the messages that come through when I take people on their journeys. I often invite their guide, and the guide could be any spiritual or an ancestor, any number of people. But the common theme that seems to come through from the guides when they come and talk to my clients is to lighten up. We take ourselves way too seriously. We're here on this beautiful, magical planet, and we need to enjoy it and honor each other, and truly honoring each other starts by honoring the self and honoring our Mother Earth. So yes, lighten up, play.
And we suffer. We create most of our own suffering with those thoughts, those emotions. What are we feeding? Mm-hmm. What are we putting attention on? And if we're putting too much attention on those judgmental thoughts or those worrisome thoughts, and that's what the Oasis is about. It's helping to quiet the noise outside of yourself, quiet the noise within, so you can listen to the wisdom within.
Absolutely. And you're right.
Connect with messengers every week.
Yes. Yeah. What are you feeding yourself? A lot of people are so mindful of eating healthy food, which is a very, very good thing. But then also the things that you're feeding yourself are, what are you listening to in the news? Yeah. What are you listening to for the radio? What are you listening to? What are you feeding your thoughts, your soul, and your spirit?
Radio program is a very healthy, soul-nourishing, soulful snack to be feeding on.
Thank you. That's the intention, is inspiring hope. That was the intention that came through from some of the session work that I have done in my own inspiring journeys. Is there are so many good people out there doing amazing things.
They are.
And I was inspired to celebrate them, to have different people talk about their journey so that then other people can get inspired instead of just listening to the negative in the news.
Yeah.
And I do have to say there's a lot of positive people. I'm seeing more the news shining the light on all the people who are doing good things for others, which I think is fabulous, and just continuing to to shine the light, to spotlight the good people, and tell us what do you recommend to people to stay inspired, to keep themselves upbeat and moving in that positive direction? Is there some sort of the Oasis is one thing, and what do you do to keep yourself inspired?
Well, you've asked 2 questions there. First and foremost, there's what are some things that are out there that you can do, and one is listening to programming like yours and connecting up with other people, kindred spirits, at places like the Oasis. There are a number of inspiring authors out there and podcasts, and the world is rich with light bearers and people who are filled with hopeful messages. On a personal level, on a day-to-day, in and out kind of thing, I, of course, invite play, and how I do that is I like to lighten up the ordinary, dull, and heavy moments of my life with play. And I'm really being observant that shaman in you, everyone has a shaman within them, is recognizing that energy and recognizing when things feel heavy and transforming that into lightness. And what are ways that you can do it? Well, something that's very simple that I love to do is play music. And I will crank up something that's got a dancey tune that cheers me up. And I'll do that while doing something that could feel like work or boring, like washing dishes. Well, that can transform that into something that I look forward to.
And that's exactly what my webmaster, I'm not going to mention his name, he knows who he is. That's exactly what he discovered, is if he wants to be creative, he's got to crank up the tunes and have it be something really energizing.
Raises the vibe really quickly.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, wow. And movement in the body definitely helps to shift. That gets the emotions from being stuck.
Yeah.
And the music, I've been listening a lot of Santana lately. I love that soulful, dancey beat.
Exactly.
And I so admire him. And I think he's a great shaman too.
So I have a question for you, Kathryn.
Yeah.
You are listening, as far as the listeners, you're listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Hermann. We're here every Sunday morning, and I hope you join us every week. Every week I shine the light on a different person with a different topic, a different theme. And Kath, have you actually had a chance to read the Chronicles of Hope? Because this is where I got my inspiration to do this show. These guides that came through and these amazing journeys said, you've got to amplify the positive, because the more we can accelerate the positive, the more we can collectively shift.
Yeah. I have not yet read your book, and I cannot wait. I'm so excited. I ordered it on Amazon. You and I had a prep conversation a few days ago. You're telling me about your book, and I'm so excited to get it, because it really sounds like the messages in your book align with that mandate I got Easter morning to share my spiritual practices and that messages of hope through my soulful journey with others. And I can't wait to read it, because I know it's going to affirm me and my soul purpose
and that's exactly
keep me going. Because I think that's going to be soul food for me.
Do you have a favorite quote that you like to share with people?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. There's so many good quotes, lots of wisdom out there. Oh, let's see here. I think in this moment, if I were to pick one quote as to sum up my love for this living this soulful and creative life, it would come from Rumi. I love Rumi. And this is the quote: "Let the beauty we love be what we do."
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
Thank you, Lois. It was such a joy to be here.
I thank all of you for listening, and I hope to see you next week. Meanwhile, look up, stay positive, and be the light in someone's day. Have a blessed and wonderful week.
WSMN 1590, Nashua's source for news and talk.